Well, Election Day, just 5 days away. But who's counting, Vlad? How many times have we said
every
this? Right,
single day.
I know. So as the races hit the final stretch, analysts say voter turnout among women will be a key factor in who wins key races across Pennsylvania and Georgia. CBS News spoke with some women voters about the issues that are most important to them ahead of Election Day.
I voted Republican all the way.
I did too.
And what made y'all want to do that?
I think the world is in a bad shape right now. The cost of groceries are outrageous. Utilities are outrageous. It keeps going up. And we need somebody in there that'll open up the pipelines and get people working again.
Yep, I agree. And I wish more of our elected officials would work with each other, no matter what party.
Inflation is temporary. So are you really going to vote for something to save 15 or 20 cents? And I understand, it's hard to make ends meet, but to save 15 or 20 cents at the gas station when your rights are at stake, and that's something that's permanent. We talk about that a lot in those terms, that, this might be fleeting. Economics, it ebbs and flows. But, taking away rights, once we lose them, it's really, really going to take a lot longer to get them back.
We vote straight Republican. Education, economy, and crime for me.
So we want to bring in CBS News reporter Sarah Ewall-Wice to talk a little bit more about the impact that women voters will likely have in the midterm elections. So we just heard from some women talking about the issues that are important to them. Are those the main factors driving women to the polls?
Yes, you know what? The economy remains the #1 issue for both women and men. But it is, when you look at women, it is the most important issue across the country. And that comes before abortion rights. It comes before crime. It comes before education. And you heard those women talking specifically about the economy. Women across the country, when you look at polling, actually see the economy as a little bit worse off than even men do. But the reality is women, when we look at who they're voting for, more women tend to vote for Democratic candidates than Republican candidates, but it's become a very even spread. And once you get into a little bit more detail, there's more nuance to that as well. But the economy remains the top issue. Women were hurt very hard by the pandemic. Women, of course, are often the ones who are going to the grocery store and figuring out what they can buy. They're the ones dealing with the high cost of childcare oftentimes. So that has come up a ton on the campaign trail. The other issues here mentioned, abortion rights. That is something that women, specifically Democrats, have been talking to me about, saying that is one of their top issues, making sure those rights are protected and trying to keep a Democratic majority Senate specifically so that those rights continue to be protected, as they are calling that. They claim Republicans might try and take away those rights at a federal level. So there's a lot of conversation around that. That's a rallying cry for Democrats specifically. And then there are other issues that are coming into play. Education, the challenges with education during the pandemic has been brought up to me on the campaign trail. And of course, crime, that has been a focus of Republicans specifically on the campaign trail in the closing week, but it's resonating with voters, especially women as well.
So, Sarah, how have the candidates in states like Georgia and Pennsylvania been able to connect with this demographic?
Yeah, so, we do know that women in Pennsylvania and Georgia could be a really deciding factor here. If you look at the Senate races in both those states, they're two of the closest races in the country. When you look at Pennsylvania specifically, I've been talking to folks. Women are definitely doing a ton of outreach, and candidates on the campaign trail, specifically John Fetterman, he has been talking about abortion rights on the campaign trail. When he connects with women, he talks about protecting those rights. Dr. Oz is talking about women in terms of crime and making sure that they keep their children safe. So those are how they're both connecting on the campaign trail. Of course, when you look at Georgia as well, this is a conversation going on very similarly. Both candidates are talking specifically about the economy. You also do see the Warnock campaign focused a lot on abortion rights. Obviously, there's the controversy around it, surrounding Walker on that issue. So that continues to be a conversation as well. And crime also playing out in Georgia in the final weeks as well.
if there's one thing that I've learned lately about talking about voting blocks is that it's not that everyone doesn't vote the same way, right? We've said that about Hispanics. We've said that about African Americans. Things are changing. You can't make assumptions. What do we know about the trends when it comes to women voting and how they vote? And why is this so important for candidates?
Sure. So what we do know is that women have voted in greater numbers than men in presidential elections since 1964. The gap closes some when it comes to the midterms, but they're still a huge voting bloc, and they've grown in the recent midterms. In 2018, we saw record turnout, and we saw women were voting pretty evenly spread in the past. During the 2018 midterms, there was a shift of women voting for Democrats that helped them both elect more women to the Congress, but also Democrats to the Congress. They took over the majorities during that election. 2020, women really helped propel Joe Biden into the White House and helped the Democratic candidates keep the majority in the House and the Senate. But what we do know about 2022 is things are different. In Virginia in 2021, last year, we saw a shift of suburban white women shifting back to the Republican Party after voting for Democrats in 2020. A new Wall Street Journal poll out this week showed that the same thing was happening in 2022. They actually saw a shift, a 27-point shift from Democrats to Republicans among white suburban women. And the focus there, the majority of them were really concerned about the economy. So we could see the battlegrounds really playing out in these tight races, specifically in the suburbs, where they may have gone for Democrats in the most recent presidential election, but they could go back to Republican candidates in this midterm election. So it is something to keep an eye on. Right now, what we do know is that more than 31 million people have already voted early. We don't really have a good sense of the women versus men in that. Among the states we do have, which is only a handful, where we break down the genders, there are a majority of women more women have voted than men, but that's just a small select group of states that we have that data for already. So it'll be interesting to see. And then the last thing I will say is after the Roe versus Wade decision that came down in June, there was an uptick in women registering to vote across the country. So that'll be interesting to see if they turn out in even greater numbers in this midterm cycle after what we saw in June and July with the voter registration. But of course, those issues that they're focused on, the economy, if that comes in at a greater importance than abortion rights, we could also see this come down to a very tight race and those numbers not factoring in as much as perhaps they would have 2 months ago.
All right, Sarah Ewall-Wice, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And a reminder, we will have coverage all day on Election Day, as well as a special edition of Red and Blue that starts November 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News.